Well, hello, and welcome to Work Cookie, our weekly gathering of IOs, HRs, recruiters, and an actor or two as we try to make the world of work just a little bit better. And today, LindaAnn, we're going to look at the Netflix culture deck. Now, why did you bring this forward? Is Netflix, did they get something right?
Well, yes, because when they wrote this culture deck, they had less than 300 employees.
Wow.
And so it was something that they did then, and they were planning, they were in the throes of an evolution in their market, right? And so they're now 14,000 plus employees, and they're a global organization. So something seemed to have worked.
And so they've been able to maintain a positive culture all the way through an expansion that's like 500 times greater than they were when they started. So how have they managed to do that? And Netflix has got a pretty good reputation out there in the marketplace. So they are one of the organizations that seems to have gotten it right on many levels. And it's great to hear that their culture is actually quite positive.
Yes, and it is. And the other thing is they've put in a tremendous amount of effort into identifying the culture that they want to have and build and maintaining it. And so there's so many organizations, whether they're small or large, that just kind of figure culture will establish itself and we'll see how that goes, right? And you can do that. I don't know that it'll get you where you want to be, right? Or that you might have to do a lot of undoing, which can be challenging. So there's a couple of primary concepts that the original deck has, and one is freedom of responsibility, freedom and responsibility, treating employees like adults, right? And that they have the freedom to act independently, but they always need to make sure that they're keeping Netflix best interests at heart in that decision-making process. Um, this is one that really rings true for me, but you have to be very careful about it. And that's stunning colleagues, right? They have a very, very high bar for performance. They want high performance performing people. And one of the things in the original deck was, okay, adequate performance gets you a good severance package, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
um, is this something that other organizations, especially if they're a small organization that's growing, or if you're having cultural issues in your organization, can you use this as sort of a template to help your organization?
If you want, I think you can. I would use the newer version, the newer improved version, if you're going to do that. I think there are some really good guiding aspects to it. And the new one. Let me just go over a couple of the ones from the older deck, and that's the stunning uh, colleagues and context, not control. Managers are expected to provide insight and direction, not micromanage, which is a very, very good guiding light when you have a team that you want leaders to grow in. Um, the other thing, this was great. No brilliant jerks. Okay.
Well, I'm out of there.
And really what that means is, because often, and I've seen this and experienced this in organizations where there's somebody who is toxic, right? Who's not really a healthy person in your organization, but they're really good at what they do. And so they've decided that it's great that you're good at what you do, but we don't want to deal with the toxicity. We don't want to deal with that. That's not part of how we conduct our culture. And now they're one of the tenets that would fall under is people over process, or we really need to make sure that we're prioritizing people, and that means the mental health, physical health of people as well. So toxicity is never a good component of that.
I'm wondering what's the time gap between the original deck and the new one? And were there any sort of significant things that they learned and changed as they grew?
Yeah, I mean, it was from the early 2000s,
Okay.
right? So it's 25 years and plus maybe. So and the world of work was very different back then, right? So it makes sense. And just going through the process as you grow and at 300, you're really, I always say that, for what I do, by the time you're at 300, you should be doing some of that internally, which they were, right? And so I think that, and just getting it all out there and then seeing how it plays, I think is important way to go, especially when there's not a lot of context. The level of communication that existed back then was extremely different.
Yeah. And communication continues to grow, and most of the times we're just making a mess of it. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I have one more thing before we go to Emmy. And the other thing, a couple other things that I think are important is it says team, not family. Okay, they don't want
Ooh.
you to refer to them as a family. Thank you very much. We are
Yes.
not families at work. But they do instead they analogize their teams to athletic teams, and what you're focused on is the performance of the team.
Right.
Right, and that's
I
the
like that.
primary piece of it. Minimal rules, which I agree with. They started out with a no vacation rule policy that like it was unlimited. Like you didn't have a
Ah,
limited amount of vacation, right? That doesn't work over time and scaling, right? There's too much variability there. And a lot of companies have tried that in the interim in the process, and that doesn't work on both ends of the spectrum. Either they take too much or they don't take any at all, those kinds of things. So, yeah, that's where we're going to start today. They were also highly aligned and loosely coupled, which I agree with because high alignment gives you your guiding light and creates its own barriers by itself. And yeah, I'm happy to see some hands raised here. So let's go.
all right, Emmy, over to you.
I love this topic, but not because I necessarily love Netflix. I love analyzing how Netflix and Blockbuster align, which I mentioned a little bit before. So I was doing a little bit of research on kind of the timeline and the overlay and what happened culturally within Blockbuster that Netflix did, for lack of a better word, better. That ultimately kept them sustaining, right? So Netflix launched in '97 when Blockbuster was alive and running well, but their mission and their focus really was on the rental concept. And so when Netflix started, they were the mail DVD service, right? Before
Right.
Blockbuster ever started doing mail service. And in fact, when Blockbuster introduced this, their cost was higher than Netflix started in their cost for the DVD mail service. So it was really interesting that they knew that they had to compete. But one of the cultural things that was happening within Blockbuster that you can read a lot about now in this kind of post Blockbuster examination world is the fact that they really did value the profit over the innovation side of it. And Netflix and their culture really has been known for a lot of their innovative things. So when you align the timelines and you think about the streaming launch of Netflix, which happened in 2007, which is already a long time ago when you think about it, and then they started incorporating their own original content. I think around 2010 is what I was reading in their streaming. That really was then the demise of Blockbuster, which kind of dates to around 2010 for a purchase. I think there was a company that first purchased them, and then ultimately they died around 2014. So you can kind of see the slow decline. And there were great things about their culture in Blockbuster, like the team element that you're noting for Netflix as well. But their focus was much more on the profit piece of it than innovating and competing. And there's a lot of really cool use cases and case studies done out there on this dynamic between the two organizations and the focus that Netflix really had on being innovative, on maintaining a culture that kept their resources engaged and employed, which is the other piece of it. And you can kind of see the decline of Blockbuster and focusing. They had a very hierarchical structure too, where that was like very top-down decision making. You kind of received at the store, this is what we're doing, or this is the way we're going with things. And then we just kind of had to implement it at the store levels with very little dialogue happening between the people actually delivering the product and your upper management structure. It was a lots of barriers. I don't even know if I met anyone that was really senior leader Blockbuster corporate ever in my tenure there. So it's very interesting when you think about that and the toxicity that that sort of a structure can bring, and that focus on profit first. I think we even touched on that last week or the week before that, that profit first focus over the innovative measures that Netflix took. And I think the culture really created the ground in the garden of Netflix, from their evolution to DVD to streaming and now to this enormous company that they are, providing entertainment in a way that Blockbuster really never could, because they had such a deep focus on the dollar piece and what they're going to get out of the rental. And they kept increasing rental costs, and they never lowered their rent to DVD. And then Redbox came in as well around that time, which is, phasing out now. But I mean, it was really not an innovative culture. It was really not a ground that they were cultivating on shifting to something else. And Netflix did that through their culture and how they allowed their employees to really contribute to that over time. And it's really amazing to see over the last 20 years, how they have grown, how they have become what they are, and they're a household name at this point. So if there's a lot of lessons learned on the cultural focus, it really is creating the ground to shift and to change with the needs of the market. And they were innovators, disruptors in this space, and were able to even create a market that didn't really even exist before because of it. So I love using them as a learning opportunity, but also to use the guys that didn't make it as kind of the other end of that spectrum to say, hey, if you don't adopt some of these practices and embed them within your organization, you may end up in the grave like Blockbuster, which is really the thing I see sometimes when you even Google their name. There's a lot of articles out there with a headstone attached to them. So
Yeah. And it's not industry specific, is it? I mean, we're talking about Netflix and the entertainment industry, but we could take the same sort of context and talk about the factory floor and a company that makes widgets. It's about the communication process and listening to your employees and creating that culture, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we could definitely take the disruptors of any industry. Let's talk Uber, right? In the
Right.
yellow cab industry, yellow cab was kind of the standard of taxiing before Uber came on the scene, and Uber created this very innovative measure which engaged people, responded to the customer desires and needs happening in the market, and they capitalized on that, right? So, what's happening in the market in any industry should really help drive how you're adapting and how your culture is open to that.
You're right. If you don't respond to the market, somebody else will. Thank you very much for that. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think everybody goes to the classic, well, Netflix killed Blockbuster. I mean, until Emmy mentioned it, I forgot about Redbox for a hot minute there. It was there, I used it, but, it's one of those things where, oh, yeah, they were in the marketplace changing things as well. So, the winners get to write history and all of that. So we see that. But I think it's really interesting to look at the original deck, and even just taking a quick scroll through all of it. They did a wonderful job of laying out, okay, these are the 7 main things, and we're going to break them all down. So it's not an accident that they developed the culture that they did. Somebody at some point sat down and asked all the questions about who do we want to be while we're doing what we're doing. And then you take that to what they put out for job seekers. They put their values out on Front Street, which says something about one of their values, which would be to some degree a level of transparency, and how, yes, it is kind of an advertisement. It's distilled. I'm sure there's still probably a, behind closed doors slide deck that goes out to new employees and things like that. But, several things don't change. And, there are several values that kind of get highlighted in different ways, just kind of looking at them side by side. So I think that there is something to be said of everybody's like, okay, this is our culture and we've arrived and this is who we are. This is who we're always going to be. Well, that's, yeah, good for a week, a month, maybe a quarter. But at some point, like we've seen with Netflix, they went from, okay, we're going to try and, take on this niche market and we're going to go by mail and save people time. And then it's like, oh, well, this streaming thing is happening. And now we don't have to deal with licensing because we're going to create our own content. We're going to get our own licensing out there. So that adaptation through all of that, you see that there are things that change in the cultural statements, but also there's some core things that really do last from one iteration to the other. And I think that's a remarkable case study. And I think it's something that probably is too often viewed as simply proprietary. And people keep that behind closed doors and they're going to guard it because they think what made them successful, will make everybody successful. And that can be true. It's a good idea. But, if you share the information, there are going to be people who try and fail to instill the culture. And that just comes from asking the questions of who are we, what do we want to do, and how do we want to do it?
As you read that, how, especially in the hospitality industry, how does that reflect on you working with your employees in an organization? Like, are you now looking at this Netflix culture and going, geez, I can incorporate some of that in my industry?
Absolutely. I think part of the beauty of the original slide deck is they talk to people like adults. They address the realities of, hey, we're in business, that we're a team, not a family. That is one of the greatest things. We always talk about the red flag of a job description of we're a family here, because family is a very loaded definition for a lot of people. And so to say, no, we're not trying to be your friend. We're your boss. We're your employer. We trust you to step out and do the things that we ask you to do them well and to keep doing them well. And if you're not, we have ways to discuss that. And if it continues to be a problem, we have no problem showing you the door if you can't hold the standard. But I think they do point to the standard and the ideal, and they don't worry about all the steps that it takes to get there. And I think that framework gives people autonomy to do their job in their way. And I think definitely in hospitality, you have to let personality come through. Nobody's paying to sit at a sit-down restaurant and have somebody give a robotic script. They're paying for some of that engagement that is going to become more bespoke and more tailored to people's experiences as we go forward with technology. But I think that you give people the standards they have to live up to, the non-negotiable points of service, and let them go from there.
There we go. Thank you very much for that. Rich, let's go to you.
Well, it's interesting how many things have stood the test of time in their culture. So things like selflessness, judgment, curiosity, these have been part of that the original deck that LindaAnn shared, and are in the current one. And it's also very interesting that there's this clip from The Little Prince that says, if you want to build a ship, don't shrim up the people to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. I mean, I think that's not only poetic, but it's a great illustration of they're looking for people that align to the purpose of Netflix, and so I think that's very important. But the thing that I noticed that's lacking in both of these, which is interesting to me, is I just did a Control F, like looking for the word customer in any of this, and looking for who do we serve, and I'm not finding so much of that, and that's interesting because there's a reason why an organization starts, and why they're there, why they exist, and it's because of the customer. This workplace culture here is interesting because it really seems to favor the internal population, if that makes sense. So it's I find that a little on one side, I find all of this very compelling, and I mean, it sounds like a great workplace. On the other hand, I'm also looking at this. I mean, there's certainly a reason why Netflix has been around for as long as it has, and dominated over many of its competitors, and has become the often imitated, never duplicated model out there, right? But they're obviously doing something to have customers continue to come back. But it's just interesting that it seems to be lacking in the cultural statement.
Yeah, you're right. That is interesting. LindaAnn, let's go back to you, because the thing that pops into my head is, if we take the customer kind of out of it and just focus on the culture of the organization, maybe the customer is going to benefit, but that's not guaranteed.
So I think that what happened was, like, if you go onto onto their website now, where that they have the new culture statements and information, it refers to their audiences. So I think that maybe that's the term that they're using as their global term versus
Yeah.
customer.
I get that. I mean, I do see audience, and they had audience before. It's just, how do I put this? We're trying to literally please the world, right? That's what they say. Like it's so all encompassing. It's hard to figure. You know, when I think about a customer and a customer's requirements, how do you manage all of? I mean, I know they're going after what people are looking for in entertainment, so that's why they have such a diverse array of options. I don't know. It just seems if any other company said we're going to do everything for everybody, it seems like it would be a challenge, an extraordinarily hard challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the aspiration of aspiring to entertain the world is quite lofty, right? But if we look at how they focus, because there is thought that if you have happy, competent employees, and they do not tolerate competence, they tolerate excellence, and things like that, that you will result in high levels of customer satisfaction. So this could be a case study in that exercise, in some ways. So we can go to Nick and to Emmy, and then Nick. And then what I'd like to do is start. There's the 4 tenets of the current culture, and I'd like to dive in a little bit on each piece to have discussion on those, so that we can really offer our opinions on what's going on now in the world of culture.
Great. Emmy, over to you.
Thanks, LindaAnn. I was actually going to touch on one of those a little bit. So let me go ahead and put this in the chat. So there's a link that I'm going to send here. It's called the Agile Manifesto, and I have shared some context around it, but I'm not sure if I've ever shared the link. It is the manifesto of agile software development or product development in this space. Now, agile has far exceeded and extended beyond software development and even technology. You have agile moving into people operations now, HR, data, all kinds of different areas and teams. And so one of the interesting things that I noted in their modern culture is really a touch on 2 of these elements. So I wonder if there's some adoption. I think there's some background noise there. I wonder if there's some adoption of the Agile Manifesto tenets and principles on how they have really created these cultural elements. Oh, sorry, give me a second. I think there's some background noise.
Yeah, Tim, if you could mute your mic, that would be good.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, so I think there's a couple of different elements that really parallel to the Agile Manifesto, which are the individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and then responding to change over following a plan. And interestingly, when you apply this in an agile team format or in a software development or technology context, or other teams now using this sort of manifesto or methodology of development, it does focus both on the internal team and how they work, as well as how you interact with your customers in the environment. So individuals and interactions can mean, how does our team, or how teamy are we? But it also can mean, how do we respond to changing requirements from the customer, or a change in the market that is requiring us to shift and adapt and kind of go outside of what we had in place for our processes and our tools. So I think it really can go inward, and outwardly, to kind of touch on what Rich was saying a little bit there. Although it may not explicitly call out the customer, the Agile Manifesto very much is a customer and team interaction and how the dynamics of the team and how you create your work happen, as well as the responding to change over following a plan. It doesn't mean that your plan isn't great. It doesn't mean that you don't need a plan, but you do need to understand how to adapt based on either the customer changing or maybe you have a developer on your team who goes out sick and they are the only one that knows how to do a certain thing. So it is just responding to changes happening anywhere in your work processes and organization. And so I kind of love to see that they have some parallel things there with the Agile Manifesto. I suspect they may have used Agile practices in their software development. It's kind of the gold standard, at least it was when they were creating and they first became an organization, and as they were growing. I suspect they had some Agile people on the team, given some heads up on how it works and the benefits ultimately for adaptability.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, we talk about the changes that have happened societally and technologically that, Netflix has not only survived, but thrived. And just that the kind of the example, if you have your culture thought out thoroughly, you're more likely to be able to weather those adaptations. Because I think if you don't have something as clear as the original slide deck is, I mean, you don't have that guiding light. And as you look even to the new one, it gives a lot of freedom, and it screams to me just the autonomy and the psychological safety that we, preach that should be in workplaces. But it does a really great job, to my opinion, of saying, as a whole company, this is who we are, this is what we do. And in that, you don't have the same rules for software developers as you do for directors and actors. You don't have the same rules for customer service reps and salespeople that you do for any other department. So it does have that freedom and the plasticity that these high level ideas can get into the nitty gritty of the daily work. And I think that's ultimately what you want in a cultural statement. You want it to be clear, concise, profound, even. But you don't want it to be so rigid that it doesn't apply in as many situations as it can.
Very true. And LindaAnn, so it sounds like this works and it's quite effective. Do you want to take us now through, Emmy gave us a couple of them, but do you want to take us through those other ones?
Sure. And I want to just respond to something that Emmy said. She was talking about responding to the customer. And that's really critical. And it's much easier to do if you're in a service-oriented business versus a widget-oriented business, right? Because when you have to go into production and change manufacturing, the ability to change is far different. But when you're in a service-based industry, one of my rules of thumb was, when somebody asked for a service that we weren't currently providing, I would say, And then when the second customer client that would ask, do you do that? And I would go, mental note, two hums. And by the third time a customer asked, I was like, you better be doing it. I would make the change and be, because it wasn't a coincidence that this was a regular ask. And if you wanted to be responsive to the market, that was my rule of thumb. When I heard it for the third time, it wasn't just a one-off. And so we would make efforts to make accommodations to stay on the cutting edge on those things. So, the first one is the Dream Team, and they have 8 values, which is nice. I think it's a lot to exercise, but good for them if they're making it work. There's a couple of key points in the Dream Team piece, and that is 1, extraordinary candor, which I think is extremely important and hard. It's hard to manage. It's not an easy thing to foster and maintain in an organization. So that it takes real diligence. And maintaining a high performance culture takes an extraordinary amount of candor and accountability, right? And then, but it also is fostered by the decency and respect. When you respect what each other is doing and what each other can offer the team going forward, I think those pieces are really, really key in maintaining the dream team, as well as, the high bar of expectation for we're, a professional performance team. And if you don't perform at a high level, you get cut. So there you go. Anybody have a comment on those aspects of, the dream team and moving forward and what it's like to really exercise those components of maintaining a high performance culture?
Well, they've seemed to strike a nice sort of balance because, yes, we want the best of the best, but it doesn't appear that, they're doing it in a rude way, that they're not being nice about it.
Right. And then there's always, and I don't know if you've ever if you went and watched it yet, Emmy, but the whole uh, pecking order of super chickens, that's my favorite TED talk, is extraordinary because if you have too many of these high performers and you don't have the right environment, they will eat each other, right? They will. And it will be a very destructive environment. So there's a real challenge in being able, like I said, this is an extraordinary, if you can maintain a high team in this environment, it takes a tremendous amount of skill and work.
And being an ex-farm boy, I've raised chickens. It's not a pretty sight. Thank you very much for that, Nick. With you.
Yeah, I think, they're unapologetic. And I think it's in the marketing that they put out, they're using candor. They're like, it's a realistic job preview. If you want to work here, we expect the best, brightest, boldest. And if you're not that, we're going to part ways. It's not saying that you can't become that. Quite frankly, it doesn't care about your feelings. They're just saying this is the way that we operate. And if you can handle it, great. If not, oh well. Like, they want a particular sort of profile and they're going to go get it. And they don't have to apologize. If you don't match it, I'm sorry, that's not what we're looking for in this instance. So I think the clarity and just being upfront and being clear, because they have thought through the culture that they want and things like that. I think that sends a clear message to a job seeker of this is what you can expect. Don't get all starry-eyed because we're a super successful organization. We're a super successful organization because we have the best people in place. And to LindaAnn's point about having to keep putting energy into the system, I mean, second law of thermodynamics, everything tends towards chaos. And I think that applies in culture and employment. Like, if you don't put the energy to sustain it, it is going to devolve into lower common denominators.
Yeah, it's like a sports team. It's hard to get to the top of the standings. It's even harder to stay there. Thank you very much. Dr. Emmy, to you.
It's so true, Tom. I wanted to touch on a couple of the elements of the dream team that were listed there, candor and courage. And the reason I want to touch on those, one, there's a book called Radical Candor, and that particular philosophy of giving and receiving feedback that's talked about in that book requires you to care personally and to challenge directly. And those are things that you do have difficulty in if your culture and your team and your organization is not primed for that. Particularly the challenging directly piece. I've worked in many places where that's a big no-no or a taboo, even if they say it's not. One of the things I really don't love is the concept of the open door policy, for instance, to come in and tell me and challenge me and talk to me, because it really implies that you feel like there's a closed door to begin with. And so I have to explicitly state that the door is open. But is it really, right? And so I think that's one of those things that really provides the example that you don't necessarily have the right environment for radical candor. And I think that there's so much value in it. And I think that book goes through a lot of those things. And I think this particular cultural kind of dissection that they have on their website that speaks to this really also speaks to the culture that they're creating to create an environment to allow that. And that other one, courage, really comes with that, to have the courage to do things that are challenging, to have the courage to challenge, and to have the courage to create something that may be a little bit radical, for lack of a better word, right? And to offer those ideas. So knowing that they've kind of set that up as the offering and shared it at the onset where it's even publicly facing, it speaks to me about creating the right environment in which that can exist within the organization.
Let me ask you this, because I love the concept too, but I can see it creating. I've got so much passion about this. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to state my case. And then I still get turned down. And now I'm angry because my passion has been turned off. So I want to keep the passion. I want my employees to be passionate about it. I want debates. I want us to be talking about things and have two sides which are just debating with each other as we're trying to find the best possible solution. But how do I navigate that so that, I hate to put it this way, the losing side doesn't walk off in a huff?
I think in general, when you're also one of the other elements is creativity, right? When you're allowing for creativity, I think there does need to be a leader or a facilitator at the helm of some of these discussions that is really able to kind of share what the ultimate mission and goal is. And I mean, from a personal level, it does hurt, but that's where that caring personally, I think about people really comes in handy. If you're working with a team where you know your teammates, your leader, your org leader for that matter, really cares about you as an individual, it does take some of that emotional piece of it because you're all working towards the same mission and goal. When you know that and you have that as a part of your culture, that creativity and all of that will yield sometimes where you don't have an ultimate result. And I do think there is definitely from a personal level, a lot of difficulty with that, but really having the investment of knowing that the individual is cared about, which is one of their tenets, right? The people over process, that then creates the behaviors on the tail end that really allow you to connect with people and say, hey, we're going to go with this idea instead, highlighting the value of those things and directly tying it to the ultimate mission or product goal. You can say, this is where we're going with this and for this reason. And, having that personal care, I think, is very important there.
Thank you very much for that. And it must really foster creatives. I mean, to have the ability to step up and be heard. Thank you very much. LindaAnn, back to you.
So what's so beautiful about this Netflix document is how much thought has gone into it. And you can see that by how well it integrates. All aspects of it integrate to support each other, the other aspects of it. So when you talked about voicing your opinion and having the ability to be candid, right? To have the courage for the courageous candor, they talk about it as farming for dissent. They want that debate that you mentioned. They want you to voice those opinions. When you have people voicing multiple opinions or giving their perspectives, that doesn't mean we can accommodate all of those perspectives, right? We're going to take that information and make the most appropriate decision that we can in the context that they talk about, right? We're talking about what works in this context to solve the problem we're talking about, but then you disagree, then commit. And that's one of the things that I've often said is I don't need to always agree with you. I do need to understand your process. How does this make sense to you? Because I don't expect me to blindly buy in. I need to understand, I would do it a different way, but I understand that you have a thoughtful process and why you think this would work. So then I can commit to supporting that process.
I'm starting to wonder if, there's a lot of business schools out there, most attached to universities, but this is not being taught in post-secondary. And I'm starting to wonder, do we need to totally revamp business education?
I can't imagine that this isn't used as a case study on some level, right? So I would imagine that very many schools would give it as a case study, but to your second point, I think that there are some things that can be. I think that the business education probably has to evolve significantly with the way that business is changing.
Yeah, day one, first lesson, hi, and I'm a psychologist. There you go. Thank you very much. Jason, good to see you again. Let's go to you.
Hey, appreciate it. So I was kind of taken back by the comment on open door because it's something I've always truly believed in. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Open door? And I thought about it for a second. You know what? There's some companies out there that promote psychological safety to such a degree that just applying to that position allows me to feel like open doors is just part of their thing. So it's not. So anyways, I just wanted to call and say thank you for that because that was a lesson learned I just picked up on. So appreciate it.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Thank you very much for that. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, I think that there's, something for me that resonates, we talk about that conflict and what do you do with the losing side? How do you keep that? And that's a lesson we need to try and teach everywhere, not just in the workplace. But I think that you look at the core four here, people over process. Like, do you want to win at all costs or do you want to get the right solution? And so I think with that dissent, you have those built-in things, and that's going to look different on, different teams. Uncomfortably exciting is the one that's, kind of there. It should be a little scary. Like it's not easy, you're operating up on the high wire, but why do people jump out of perfectly good airplanes? Because it's exciting. Something can go terribly, terribly wrong, but there is that thrill of accomplishment of overcoming whatever challenge or stunt that it is. And so again, what also really resonates with me is this is all on Front Street on their job site. Like this is the face that they're putting out to people who want to work for them. And I understand that with being a wildly successful organization, they're going to get a lot of volume just because, Netflix is going to look great on my resume, and it will. But, here's exactly who we are, and these are the standards. And I would imagine, I've never applied for a position, but their, automated messaging of we've received your application, or unfortunately we've gone on with other candidates. Those are going to look very similar and sound very much the same as this. So it's not a bait and switch. It's not, look at us, we're so great. Well, we're great because our people are great. We acknowledge that, and we want to bring more great people in. And again, just that concept of a realistic expectation is so huge. And I would be interested to hear the tales of people as they go through the onboarding, and how much that through line carries to onboarding, their time there, and even in separating from the company.
So Netflix, if you're listening, give us a call. Thank you very much for that. Dr. Emmy, back to you.
I loved the call out that LindaAnn made, which is talking about how they all really tie and link together. And as I was thinking deeper about your question, Tom, on bringing an idea to the table that gets kiboshed, I looked at and reflected on two of the other elements there in the dream team. So number one was selflessness, that is literally listed first on there. And the thing that stood out to me there is you take time to help others succeed. And so it's kind of an others focus that kind of embeds within there that you have, that you're using a humble method of searching for the best idea, not to make your idea the best, right? And so I think that to me really speaks to how that culture can kind of be cultivated if they really are living these values. And the other one that's there is resilience. The last line in the resilience section says you embrace a hard challenge. And I love that. I often tell my teams, I love a good BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. It is often what we're allowed to kind of work in the tech sector a little bit. So some areas and industries are a lot more risk averse. So maybe your medical industry, but even they have innovative measures, right? And what they do and how they really move forward the medical industry, whether it's surgical or, in the medicine world or all of those things. So it does require us to embrace a hard challenge and to work through it in that sense. So I think some of those other cultural elements will really help kind of kill the ego of my ideas best, if you will, for lack of a better word. Not that I don't sometimes think my ideas are the best. Sometimes I absolutely do. And I walk into the room thinking that. And when there's like 100 darts thrown at my idea, I do kind of walk away a little bit deflated in that moment, but that's where the resilience comes in. You don't really, the other thing, I think that it was Nick that mentioned it there, is it uncomfortable, or the other outside of that is it painful, right? And uncomfortable things are what help grow us and stretch us. Painful things do not. And I think about even working out, I've heard that from a personal trainer. Is it uncomfortable or is it painful? If it's uncomfortable, it's helping you grow potentially. It's helping you be more flexible, whatever those things are you're trying to achieve. Or is it painful? And if it's a painful thing, that's something that needs to be eliminated. But if it's uncomfortable, that is growing you, it is strengthening you, and it is stretching you beyond where you were before.
I think I've grown enough. Thank you very much. Now, I guess there's always room for more growth. Rich, over to you.
Oh, there's so much there, Tom. Okay, so yeah, I gotta say I appreciate their over the time from the first for the first culture statement to this one, where adaptability and resilience have become more of the conversation. They mentioned adaptability like once in the slide deck about how markets shift and then companies cannot roll with it, right? I don't know if that was a dig against Blockbuster. Hey, could possibly have been, honestly, but they put that back then, and now it's core to what they're talking about here, and the concept of people before process makes a lot of sense in the context of like the Cruz and Posner's leadership challenge. They have the five practices of exemplary leadership: model the way, shared inspired vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. These I see these embedded in this newer culture model significantly. So they're certainly modeling the way for a lot of other organizations, especially to be able to navigate all these shifts. I mean, when the pandemic was there, they were able to roll through that with no problem and gain tremendous amount of market share, right? So their ability to adapt and be resilient is certainly something that is aspirational. At the same time, I will say that, and I appreciate the whole idea about challenging the process and people over process, right? But push comes to shove, and there's going to be, let's just say, they decide to sell a piece of it off or whatever. They're going to be turning to going to process and going, what are the replicable processes that we could have that add value to the company? I think there's a part of the adaptability here, which maybe I'm missing it in here, right? But I think there's a level of where from an organizational development standpoint, right? You can have these team-based cultures, right, that are or subcultures maybe even within the organization, but at some point there is something where you're going to employ the refreeze part of Lewin's change model to freeze it into the culture as an existing process. I mean, you certainly challenge the process and try to make it better, continuous improvement, all that stuff, right? But at the same time, I think you do have to have processes that are going to deliver the quality, and in other words, the requirements of the customer. Going back to the audience, right? When you don't have processes that deliver a consistent product, right? You tend to lose customers and market share. Blockbuster.
Well, LindaAnn, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, because like if they did get bought out or something, then that there was change of leadership. Part of this is like the two pieces that I wanted to go to next was highly aligned and loosely coupled means, that a approach gives the teams the freedom to move quickly and operate independently, where you're really empowering your leadership team, but empowering them to stay aligned with their goals, ideas, purpose, all those kinds of things. And it also is integrated with the other component of almost no rules, okay? The freedom to exercise their judgment. And I think that, when I taught school, had taught seventh grade, and I only had one rule, right? And the rule was, because they were often like, well, no throwing paper, and you can not do this and not do that. My only rule was you were not allowed to interfere with someone else's opportunity to learn, right? And there's a lot that comes under that umbrella. So you don't have to have a lot if you have the right one or two, right? That keeps and you keep that in the forefront of how they live and work every day. That makes everything so much easier. And, I have like one of my clients, we've just been through, he just did a kind of a mini acquisition, and it's part of the strategic alignment goals and all those kinds of things. And it's the other day he said, holy cow, we might just crush achieving these strategic goals, right? Which is not something that all of them, and not something that many organizations can do. But if you stay, the mantra has been alignment, alignment, alignment. And if you stay the course, as long as you're adapting those courses, because my final comment is at the end, one of the things they say, great and always better, and they say that they seek to improve their culture, not preserve it. And I think that's a powerful statement, where you cannot keep this company, any company, as a snapshot in time. It has to evolve constantly.
Yeah, it certainly does.
Nick, did I get too far off of your point?
I think we're good. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, Tom, to your point about does this need to be being taught in business schools, I think we're kind of starting to see the science and the action start to converge a little bit. There's a delay because too often research is done in proprietary, fashion and things like that. So there's a gap before it gets out into the hands and hearts of people. But I think that this being public information, it's a great case study. And even you think about good to great, that all the examples that are there, and then the research shifted to how do you stay great and things like that. But I mean, this is just kind of the next iteration of those great companies that have found that one thing that can help them be successful. They've probably found multiple things to that as well. But I think, we always talk about, generational changes, generational differences. If this is the example that, business school students are seeing, is it going to trend that way, or is it going to trend away from that? And so I think, as we've already seen a shift to software as service as a major player in business markets, you are going to see hopefully a return to the human side of things, where if you establish your culture and you take care of your people and you put them front and center as a primary stakeholder, yes, people giving you money are important, but the people doing the work are equally as important, and even as equally important as the people who are buying your product. All three of those should be given equal weight and care and attention. And I think that this cultural statement does a lot to go that way. And I would, I'll be a starry-eyed optimist and say that the more we see these examples succeeding of good and properly thought out cultures, the more people are like, oh, that's good for business. Let's get on that train.
Yeah, I agree. And LindaAnn, so, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, should other organizations be getting a hold of, Netflix Culture Deck and looking at it and going, maybe we need to implement some of those things here?
I think that's a stellar idea, in my opinion. Because think about it. As we've had this discussion, we've really been able to understand how well thought out and highly integrated it is, right? And so if you can do some of that, take the pieces that really really resonate for what you want to achieve as an organization, I never see the need to reinvent a wheel. If somebody's done the hard work and you can benefit from that, do that.
Yeah. Maybe we do need to get Netflix on the show and go, so tell us how you did this. Where do they start? Where to organize? I mean, I can go and get that, but if I want to actually implement it, where do I start? Do I want to focus on the culture? Is it the communication?
I think you need to have a sit down with your top leadership and decide that you want to get there,
Right.
right? Because if you don't, if you just in a vacuum try to roll this stuff out without having that initial buy-in and understanding of how well something like this can serve your particular organization and solve some of the major problems you might be having through the process, and the first step. The second step in that is understand that you can't decide this on Wednesday, roll it out on Friday, and expect it to be part of your culture on Monday.
Well, how long is it going to take?
Well, it depends on how challenging your current culture is, right? And how much
Right.
time you've spent, because if you haven't paid attention, if you're 10 years old, 10 years in, and you haven't paid attention to it, you just, our culture is like this because we came off the kitchen table 5 years ago, and, this is how, it is. And it's worked so far. Yeah, it's been doing it for 10 years and it's worked so far. That's a really different environment to roll something out like this than if you're 3 years in and you're going to pay attention from the beginning.
Right. And if any organization is considering making that transition, they can call you up or any one of the IO consultants here and get some help with that.
Absolutely.
There
Absolutely.
we go.
It's the fun stuff, in my opinion.
And
We're all nerds in our own way, right?
exactly. What is it like working with an organization who is sort of making this movement? I mean, it must be difficult at first, but there must be that point when the light bulb goes on and they realize how much it's going to benefit them down the line.
Yeah, but you have to, okay, so what was the catalyst that created that light bulb, right? Why is it that
Hmm.
now they're having that light bulb moment, right? Are they in crisis, or they just want to be, or did somebody catch them early enough on in their process that they really want to do it right from the beginning, and I've been an athlete a lot of my life, and I preferred to learn it to do the right the first time and not have to unlearn and relearn. That's a far more painful process. So
I'm not sure entrepreneurs set out with being successful and knowing how to get there. Um, it's often a tricky path, but it's great to have advice like this that clarifies a lot of what you need to do to grow an organization and be successful in the long term. So thank you very much for that.
my pleasure, because one of the things is when you see how it benefits somebody, when you start to see the return on investment, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You buy in more and more and more as you see it work.
Yes, you. And we're done for today, but I think next week we're going to have an open mic discussion. Do you know anything about that?
I do not. I do have a promo though to make sure that I announce at the end of this. Yeah, I'm done for my month. We're going into August, so I haven't seen the topic for next week yet. But I do want to remind people that August is tomorrow, and in August, the IO Psychology Awareness is IO Psychology Awareness Month. And to celebrate this year, we're offering 30% off the IO Career Accelerator course for the entire month of August. And for listeners of this podcast, you can use the code AWARE, AWARE, 32 for an extra 2% off. So you would get 32% off of that course if you're looking to find help in how to determine your focus for obtaining an IO psychology job. And then that helps us track, that you are a listener of the podcast.
There you go. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of all the things you can find at the CBOC website, including just the weekly gatherings. Just get to know your community and share your experiences. And more than likely, networking like that is going to help you with your career. So thank you very much, everyone, again, for your contribution. LindaAnn, thank you very much for leading this month. It's been a great month. And everybody, we'll see you back here in 1 week's time. So LindaAnn, if you want to count us out.
2, 3, wait, no. 1, 2, 3, we're out. I'm backwards again. Bye.